what little girls should or shouldn't do. And that was
Okay.
pretty much it. And that's the
And
one time I recall like seeing him.
do you remember what he said little girls should and should not do?
He told me I needed to wash my hands because I had been playing. I had been playing with my cat, our cat Fufa,
Mhm.
and he basically was like, "Hey, why do your hands stink?" And I was like, "I was playing with my cat," and he was like, "You always wash your hands." I'm like, "Okay," and that's pretty much it.
Okay. So I imagine if you had a superhero and then, he kind of goes away or disappears from that role between the ages of 9 and 15 in terms of your attitude towards boys, do you feel like you might have been looking for someone to fill that slot in terms of making you feel safe and pretty and special and nurtured?
No, I do
Okay.
not recall that at all.
Do you recall not looking for that specifically?
I don't recall looking for it and or not looking for it. My mother, I think once we moved out, my mother at some point really got into church,
Okay.
got into religion, and when she got into religion, we got into religion, and we were at such a young age that the transition, I guess, at that point, Jesus Christ became, that replacement, so to speak.
Okay.
And so, she delved into that, and we did, of course, as children, you don't have a choice, so we did as well. And I think that's really where I found comfort, because I don't recall really stressing that, him not being there. The only time I think the only time that it was an issue was when my mother was dating, and I didn't like the guys. One particular guy I didn't like at all, but it could be because when it comes to my mother, my parents in general, when it comes to my mother, I just, I'm very particular about the guys that she would date, and it could be because they weren't my father.
And that's normal. I think most kids your age, given that situation, would have felt the same way. Do you remember the whispers that you were hearing about him being an addict? Were they coming from family, friends, neighbors?
They were coming. I don't remember who they came from. I know it came from outside the house. And I think it was more so, I wouldn't necessarily call them friends, acquaintances, associates, people who, because where we're from, the city it's the second largest city in Michigan, but where we live, that particular community, neighborhood area, the inner city, it was small. And if you're getting, and most of the black men around that, of course, it's the 80s. So most of the black men in that area ended up being addicts more often than not. So it I'm sure I believe who did I hear it from? And it might have been a dope dealer that I was hanging out with one morning, and I think it might have been said to me, but someone said it to me. I can't recall. And for me, whoever said it to me, I didn't believe it anyway. So it was one of those things like, yeah, whatever, you're lying. And I kept it moving. And I don't know if I told them verbally that they were lying, but I do remember not receiving it as the truth.
So middle school and high school, how did the relationship go with you and your dad in high school? Because I think 15 you'd be in high school.
It was non-existent for the most part. I mean, we would talk we would talk and have, and that was in. I don't recall really seeing him. If I had issues, I knew I could call him. But one of the things that if ever I had issues, I didn't call because I knew that if I did, there was going to be some hell that broke loose because my dad is a fighter. He's somebody who's not. One of the things I know about Byron Walker is he's fearless, and he has no problem with going to prison. He's been stabbed, he's been shot, he's been drugged down the street by a car, and so one of those things is like, if anything happened to me, I would not tell him because I knew there was a possibility somebody was going to get killed, and I don't think it would have been him.
Okay. So you also had to kind of love him from a distance and not really turn to him as a problem solver because his way of solving problems were very extreme.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. And so as you're dated in high school, are you noticing that you're wanting to have any kind of emotional attachment to anyone in high school that you're dating?
I didn't really date in high school.
Okay.
Especially in Michigan. No, I didn't really date in high school, period, even when my mother moved us here. I liked certain people, but in high school I didn't really date. And the only person I really did date, he ended up being my fiance. I was engaged at 16.
Okay.
Joseph, but I really don't count him. And so in that, I guess in that realm of dating, and when I think dating in high school, it's like somebody I'm dating in high school, and we weren't in the same high school together. But it was,
Joseph was at a different school?
Yeah, and he was a little older than me.
Okay, and how long did you guys date?
We met when I was 15. It's so interesting because I would, break it off with him when I just didn't want to be bothered, or if I was interested in someone else, so to speak. I would, according to him, I would just be like, you know what, we need a break. So I would take a break. We would take a break. But I think we dated till I was like 17.
How did the engagement occur? How did that develop?
He swore up and down I was his wife. He still probably think it should be his wife today. He thought I was the one, and of course I did. He kind of reminds me of a Sherman, where he thought that I was the one, and we just dated, and he said he wanted to marry me, and he asked my mother, and my mother said yes. And she agreed. It was cool, and we ended up going to look at some rings and all that stuff. And I really honestly don't know exactly how it came about. I just knew we ended up dating, and at some point he was for real, and we went and got rings.
Okay. Do you remember being in love with him, or?
I was never in love with him.
Okay. Is that why the engagement was called off, or you just told him you needed a break and never came back?
I think we just really ended up parting ways. I wouldn't say we grew apart. It was just, I think, a lot of things being young and immature. Some things had transpired, and it was just like, I'm cool. His mom, I think there was a few incidents, I'm sure, but there was two in particular, that really created an issue. One, my supposed friend had gone out. I was at home doing something or not doing anything at all, really, and I don't know if he called. I think he had called, and because we didn't have cell phones back then. I ended up getting the message from somebody, and I think it might have been him or his mother, that him and Marquita, they were rolling around because, on Saturdays and Sundays, you do the cruising with your people, and you get in the car and you roll up and down the street and whatnot. And she was in his vehicle with him in the passenger seat, which was my seat. And they're cruising, and I'm like, wait a minute, how is this shit happening? Like, why are you picking her up and she's rolling with you and I know nothing about it? And she literally lived across the street from me, diagonally. So how the fuck is that happening? So I had to have that conversation, and I can't even remember how that conversation went, but I found out about it, and I was like, oh, wow, my homegirl is literally rolling around with my fiance, and I'm finding out about it after the fact.
Okay. So that is something that I can hear the emotion about. Was there any correlation between what he did and anything you felt like your father did in terms of boundaries?
No.
Okay.
I didn't even, I don't correlate that at all. I mean, it could have something to do with it, but I don't think so.
Why do you think you just didn't accept it as you did everything else?
I think because he was my fiance, supposedly. And that to me was like, why would you even do something so foolish?
So then was it easier for you to not accept something from your fiance than it was for you to not accept something from your dad? Because it seems like it with one, you have an expectation and he let down or disappointed that expectation. But when you talk about your dad, you don't really acknowledge the disappointment. You just went straight to the acceptance.
I think when I was younger, I went straight to the acceptance. As I got older, certain things just was unacceptable.
Okay. That makes sense. And so did you guys break up as a result of that?
We probably did.
Okay.
We probably did. I just don't recall. I definitely know I was hot as fish grease about it.
Okay. All right, so that was over. And you kind of dated in between him when you told him you needed a break, usually because you were
didn't. It wasn't dating. I was just messing around.
Okay.
I started situationships very, very early.
Situationships.
Those were very, very early. No commitment. It was just playing, like curiosity. I think, at that point, it was just like once I started really having interest in guys and started having sex, I was like, oh, I like this. This is all I need to do. Okay. But I also realized when I started having sex, well, actually, I realized after, like way before, I should say, there was an individual that I liked when I was younger, Hector. And he liked me. I'm assuming he liked me because he would always come around with his boys. But because I was young and I wasn't having sex at the time, there was only so far it was going to go. But there was this girl, it was a white girl. I think her name was, I can't think of that white girl's name. But I remember her being a redhead. And I remember getting upset because I knew she was having sex and I wasn't. And that's why he and I weren't really in a relationship, so to speak. Whatever kind of relationship an 11-year-old can have with a boy. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Okay, I had to bless my food.
Okay, no problem.